Buenas tardes a todos. Voy a dar una breve introducción en español, en particular también pensando en nuestro público que nos escucha en Facebook. Bienvenidos a todos y nuestro público aquí presente también. Es un honor y un placer estar aquí hoy con Masson Richards, que es cineasta de Guyana y vive actualmente en Los Ángeles, en Hollywood. Estamos participando hoy en la sesión número 26 del Seminario Permanente Estudios sobre el Caribe, Perspectivas Transdisciplinarias. Masson hoy nos va a hablar sobre migración, diáspora y cómo trabajar con cine y con los discursos visuales en el Caribe y en América Latina. Tiene una trayectoria muy interesante como cineasta. Vamos a proyectar también su primer corto que se llama The Seawall, el malecón, que tenemos hoy. Para los que están escuchando en Facebook, vamos a apagar la grabación durante 10 minutos cuando proyectamos el documental, pero reconectamos nuevamente después para continuar platicando, ¿no? Un poco para darnos la estructura, porque esta plática va a ser en inglés. Para dar la estructura, para que nos sigan un poquito más cómodamente. Después de esta introducción, Masson va a hablar un poquito sobre su formación, qué le llevó a trabajar en cine, cuál es su interés en particular en descubrir y revelar estas narrativas, cuál es la importancia en el contexto del Caribe de hablar desde los discursos visuales y cómo contribuyen a visibilizar esas historias ocultas, por ejemplo, ¿no? También va a hablar un poco de su propia experiencia, cómo inmigración ha impactado en su experiencia personal y cómo eso se vuelve a entrar en esas historias y abrir el debate sobre la migración, ¿no? Después veremos la película y volvemos a comentar después. Si hay tiempo e interés, después tenemos dos breves películas documentales pequeñas que son biográficas, entrevistas con Masson que también arrojan mucha luz sobre esta discusión de migración, el arte y los diferentes discursos que pueden representar nuestro Caribe, ¿no? A mí me ha interesado también mucho introducir nuevamente, tanto en la sesión anterior como esta, los discursos visuales para ampliar nuestras competencias lingüísticas para hablar del Caribe. No basta solamente con las palabras, el discurso visual nos ayuda muchísimo, entonces vamos a empezar con eso. Masson, welcome. Please forgive that long introduction in Spanish. I know you're following some of it.
Yes, I'm sure it was wonderful.
We're delighted to have you here, and we really look forward to hearing you talk to us about migration, about the Caribbean, about how the visual discourse can help us to understand what we're doing, and really how and why you got into doing what you're doing, and where it's going to take us. So, please.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for having me as a guest here in Yucatan at the university here. It's wonderful just being here for the past few days, meeting with the students and everyone here. The Seawall, my film, The Seawall, is a love letter to my country, to Guyana. It's a 9-minute short film that I did as a thesis film from grad school from Cal Arts. It's sort of done in the poetic style. At Cal Arts, we study sort of really strong visual storytelling with an emphasis on sound and just images to evoke emotions. So the title of the film. So the title of
the love song to Guyana.
Yeah, the love letter.
That's beautiful. Yes, lovely.
So
yes.
Go back.
Yeah. Well, no. Just he was just saying that the Seawall is a love song to his.
A love letter.
Love letter.
Love song.
Love letter to your country.
Right. Yeah. So the Seawall, my short film, is sort of like a love letter to my country, Guyana, where I was born. And in Guyana, actually, the Seawall is a man-made stone structure that lines the Atlantic Ocean. And so in the film, it's sort of symbolic for the separation between Guyana and the rest of the world. And that's the conversation we're having about immigration and about migration, is that people leave Guyana and a lot of them never go back. You know, there are more Guyanese living outside of the country, millions, than the 800,000 living in the country. So there's an issue with sort of people leaving and not coming back. And I was one of those, you know, people. My family, you know, immigrated. My mom, my sister, my brother, and I. We immigrated when I was 7 years old, and I didn't want to leave. I just fell in love with, that was my home, and so I wanted to make a story about that, about migration, about leaving a place as a child, and what does that mean? So I went back to Guyana 20 plus years later to make this film. And I was fortunate enough to live in the house that I was born in. My grandmother's house is still there in Kitty. And so I was able to spend a month there and connect to my young self as a kid. And a lot of it was all the visuals, like the smell of the city after rain, the birds, the sound of the birds, and the kiskadis at night after it rains, the food, the coconut water man, all the basic things of life. You know, you would see, Guyana, you would see, cows going down the street with a car, and then, a goat. And so all of those things I sort of missed. So the film is an attempt to capture that, and it captures just one night of this boy Malachi who has a chance to visa to go away to New York to be with his mother, and he doesn't want to go. So it's between him and his grandmother, her preparing and her getting ready for his departure, which is another major theme in the film. Is oftentimes when we think about immigration or migration, we think about the people that leave, but we forget about the ones that stay in the country. And we assume that life is either good or bad. And so I wanted to kind of focus a little bit about that, like what happens to the people that stay. And in the feature film, I'm working on the feature film version of the Seawall, the short you'll see. I get a little bit more into that story, into Malachi, the character and his friend, who is Indo-Guyanese, because Guyana has 53% of the population is Indian or indentured servants, and then there's 40% are African descent who were slaves, enslaved people, in addition to the Amerindian, the native, the Chinese, and Dutch, and European people there. So that's a lot. That's like my intro in the film. But it is truly a love letter to Guyana, and it's for me. There's a lot of power in being able to own and tell a story that's my truth, and the truth of
perspective, right?
From my perspective, right? Like I feel like once we have the tools of filmmaking and literature and writing, it's our responsibility in marginalized, underrepresented groups to use those tools, whether it's film, a camera, a pen, and really rewrite and tell our stories. It's sort of like a creative reparations, if you will, right? Reparations. We want, it's our way of saying this is the perspective, from my experience living in Guyana, and this is my experience as an immigrant in America. So hopefully you'll enjoy the film.
Can I ask one question before we see the film?
Yes.
Sometimes when, mostly because we are talking here with students of literature, how difficult, or what do you do as a filmmaker to stop your text becoming nostalgic? And how do you make that switch from recreating memory, reconnecting with your childhood self, and reconnecting with the story you want to tell without it becoming nostalgic?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Nostalgic.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So the number one thing I believe in literature and also in film is that your pieces, our work has to be universal. It has to have a universal theme and universal message that connect and reach a large amount of people. So I would classify my film as auto-fiction, like autobiographical, but also fiction, like I create. So a lot of it is based on my memory and my personal story. Do you want me to use the mic?
Paramos? Sí.
Should I use it? Hello. Test. Is this on? Okay.
It's on. Yeah.
So the question is about how do you move away from just making your story autobiographical or
nostalgic, and getting lost in one lost memory, so that maybe often I think when we're evoking something in a nostalgic way, we focus on something that we remember, but maybe it doesn't have a resonance today. So how do you make the connections to the present through your story?
Got it. So the process of making the film started out very with nostalgia, like me thinking about my grandmother in Guyana and the things that I knew, and I actually went back to Guyana and spent some time writing the script. But what changed it to make it a bigger, more universal story is I started to think about not just me, my experience, but thinking about other people who were like me, who had similar experiences. So I interviewed and I talked to other people in the community, and I read books about Guyana, Arnold Apple, The Son of Guyana, and other books to sort of get a broader scope of what the landscape is, and then figure out how can I, carve the story out to make it sort of unique, but also universal. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I did that was also important, especially for the feature, is I showed the short film to people in Guyana from all walks of life, different ages, different racial groups, backgrounds, and got their feedback and said, what is your memory of the seawall? Mm-hmm. What is your memory about, what is your idea, what is your concept of the interior or things like that? And I was able to sort of get it out of my nostalgia and create something that was more universal.
Yesterday you were talking a lot about, with our students from social communication, you were talking about the importance of empathy. So how you connect, so that I think relates to what you were saying about autofiction or community documentary. That's how the individual and the community link together, and to create empathy in some way.
I mean, I think in any form of I was an English major at Vanderbilt, did a lot of writing and poetry. Mm-hmm. And any form of any creative work that we do, it's important that we practice empathy. Being able to put yourself in the perspective of the character, your main protagonist, the character, to drive that story, right? And I also think we have to be dyadic and didactic in a sense. Let me break that down, where you must write the story based on the character's journey and their want and what they're after, but then also think about your audience. You have to think about what's the reach. What is the ultimate goal that we're trying to hit, especially when we're doing storytelling from perspectives that we haven't seen very often. Sure. We have to know the landscape of the audience, and we have to know the perspective of the character. And the empathy is where the stuff gets really interesting, where we can sort of really understand the intimate sort of moments and thoughts of a character. And in film, that shows up, in images and moments. Since film is such a visual medium, you must be able to look at an image and get an emotion and understand what's happening, connect to what's happening there.
Whether there's dialogue or not, right?
Whether there's dialogue or not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. There's plenty more we want to talk to Mason about. How, if we look at the film and then come back to the discussion, because I don't want to. I know that if I keep talking, I'm going to betray all the things we're going to see in the film, because there's a lot of things that we would like to talk about, and I think we should see the film first. So, okay, should we do the next bit? So if we turn off the Facebook for a little bit, we turn off all the cameras for a little bit. Muchas gracias a todos por acompañarnos a ver esta proyección, la primera vez que se proyecte en México. Esperamos pronto que se repita esta proyección, ¿no? Bueno, iniciamos una discusión en español, como quieren iniciar. Creo que hay puntos muy interesantes que se relacionan de alguna manera con lo que estaba comentando Mason antes, sobre de cómo construir esa narración de migración desde una perspectiva íntima, personal, que también puede ser entendido de una comunidad más amplia, ¿verdad? Adelante.
Bueno, a mí me resonó un poco la idea de este migrante, de esa persona que se va, con un cuento que leímos en la materia de Caribe, que se llama Punto Final. No me acuerdo ahorita de la autora.
De ese Mackenzie.
Sí, que era es una narración epistolar entre la carta de la nieta, que está en Estados Unidos, y de la abuelita que se quedó. No recuerdo en dónde se quedó.
Gabby is saying that watching the film reminded her of a text we read, a short story we read in the class called Full Stop by S.A. Mackenzie, who's a Jamaican Canadian, Jamaican and diaspora. She's moved around, and so she's going to explain a bit more.
Oh.
Y bueno, siempre esta relación, como había dicho que el filme es una carta de amor, ¿no? Me pareció curioso que también en este cuento se usa el recurso del epístola, pero en este caso la correspondencia entre la abuela y la nieta, que siempre es esta idea de la persona que se queda, pero también la perspectiva de la que está afuera, ¿no?
In the story that she's remembering, it's also written as a letter. I mean, as she's recording what you said about filming a love letter to Guyana, and this was a letter written between the grandmother and the daughter, and which also tried to construct what the two points of view.
Entonces me parece curioso que siempre se recupera ese recurso del que está en el lugar y del que se fue. Y curiosamente es también esa relación entre una nieta y una abuela, y lo que dice al final en el filme de que ella estaría orgullosa de decir que su nieto está en Estados Unidos y le está yendo bien, es lo mismo que la abuela en este cuento le dice a su nieta, ¿no? Tú eres una enfermera o una doctora, no recuerdo, y estoy orgullosa de que hayas estudiado y de que estés ahí, que es un poco similar a la situación.
Gabby is touching on a very interesting point that comes up in your film and also relates back to the story, which is the relationship between grandparents and grandchildren. In this case, grandmother, grandson. In the case of the story, grandmother, granddaughter. In the case of Yochi, which we saw at the beginning of the month, also the relationship was with the grandmother and the grandson. It's the generation in the middle that's migrating. So I think perhaps there's a question there about why the relationship with the missing generation in migration stories that we are now telling.
Right. Yeah, and that's a really good question. I just wanted to say thank you for being here. Thanks for asking that. This is the first time in Mexico the film is being screened, so I'm really excited. It played in the Havana Film Festival in Cuba, and there was a lot of similar reactions. People can connect and relate to certain things, losing someone through immigration, migration. I specifically chose to have the relationship between the grandmother and the grandson because the middle family generation is usually the one that's immigrating or migrating, and the grandchild and the grandparent are sort of the extremes. Like the grandparent represents the old ways, the traditions, the historians of the family, the patriarch that have the history of they're connected to the land, and then the younger ones are the future. And so I guess I'm making a statement that when the youngest, the newest, leaves the soil and the history, what's there, there's a disconnect, right? There's a disconnect with the culture. And I think that was my thinking in making it specifically the grandson, the youngest, and the grandparent. And like I was saying, Margaret, thanks for having me again. This screening in particular, it was sad, and I realized how emotional it is because there's a lot of trauma that happens when families are separated through migration and immigration, and that's something that comes up. So the grandson, hid his passport and he didn't want to leave because he doesn't understand what life beyond the seawall is. What's on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, right? So you move into this new space, this better life in America or wherever, and there's always a piece of you that's left behind. the final image of the grandmother sitting there. It's her. It's the soil. It's the and you never feel complete. A lot of immigrants, in countries, you don't feel complete. There's something that's always missing, and that was the impetus. That was the thing that drove me to do this love letter to Guyana. So the connection between the grandchild and the grandmother represents the newest, the hope, the future of the country, and then the history, the soil, like the roots, the generation.
I also find that image of the grandmother at the end very sad. But I think, again, it depends. I think I've seen the film now several times, and I think as you look at it you identify with different characters. I identify with different characters each time. And this time watching her, really sad. It made me think of my own situation. I think when I chose to migrate, it wasn't a forced migration, but I chose to migrate, and I basically packed my suitcases and came. And I didn't really think about what I was leaving behind or who I was leaving behind. I was in touch through phone and email with my parents and letters, lots of letters, and then emails as time progressed and technology evolved. But I remember a striking conversation with my mother more recently, shortly before she died, when my own daughter then left to go to the United States. And it all fell into place, and I said to my mother, I understand what you must have felt when I left. And I hadn't felt that sadness until the situation went round again. So I can understand. So that's why I feel sad watching the grandmother, because you feel that loss when your person goes. But I didn't. When I was doing it to my parents, I didn't think about it.
A lot of times people do immigrate by choice. A lot of times, what I find, a lot of times people immigrate by choice, like you did, Margaret, and you leave Guyana, you leave the Caribbean, you leave and go for a better life. And sometimes people never look back. And what I found in the years of traveling with the film and having conversations, and I think part of the way the style of the film is to elicit conversation. It's creative work, but it's also a tool to talk about migration, immigration, loss, family, etc. What I found over the years is that people migrate by choice and they never look back because there's a lot of trauma sometimes that happens in those scenarios. And, in working on the feature film, I've had to tap into a lot of that stuff to see, and that's where it gets kind of deep. Because within our country, within the Caribbean diaspora, there are a lot of things that happen in the country that are very traumatic. There's a lot of injustices towards women and children, a lot of abusive situations, sometimes a lot of poverty, and people choose to want to get out and not look back. And so part of the conversation, focus of the feature is how do we deal with those traumas that exist currently in those countries within the Caribbean.
We need to tell the story.
We need to tell the story to again have the conversation about the traumas. A lot of times the traumas are the effect of colonization, the effect of poverty and all these other issues that make people want to leave. So there's a bigger conversation, and this is why I think art is about showing the work, telling the stories, so we can have more conversation to ultimately bring us closer together as people. Did you have a question?
He always has a question.
Is it okay?
I try to speak in English, and it's not my mother language, but I try.
I appreciate it.
Okay, I thought about the empathy, the importance of empathy, because I will speak in Spanish.
Speak in Spanish.
Pienso en la empatía. Porque cuando vi la película, las emociones están girando alrededor de la abuela, del nieto, seguramente de quien está afuera ya, de Guyana.
When he watches, he's seeing how the emotions flow around the main characters, and also he assumes in those who are watching, as those who are outside, but particularly this circuit of empathy of emotions that are created between the mother and the grandmother and the child.
Y entonces también pienso en about us, en nosotros, porque hay quienes no hemos experimentado, o tal vez nunca experimentemos una migración forzada o no forzada, tal vez no salgamos de este terruño, o quién sabe, ¿no? Tal vez no las mejores condiciones, pero creo que la expresión artística en este caso plantea al menos como 4 espacios que se van tejiendo, uniendo a partir, o sea, no solamente del espectador, de quien ve la película, quien la lee, sino también de los personajes.
He's saying that not all of us are going to be in the position of experiencing migration. And some people we may not have the opportunity to leave voluntarily or not voluntarily. But he's going to explain. He's identified 4 spaces which he thinks weave together in which I think he's going to explain.
Cuatro.
Yeah, 4, yes.
4, que son la visión de la abuela,
The perspective of the grandmother,
del niño, de grandchild, parents, los ausentes, sí,
the absent parents,
sí, la visión ausente y la nuestra,
la nuestra
sí, nosotros como lectores, el público en sí mismo.
And the grandmother, the grandchild, the space of absence, which is a very interesting space, and the space of the person who watches.
Yeah. Y pienso que todos estos espacios y estos espacios y tiempos se tejen o se unen a partir de la empatía, o sea, a partir de la experiencia que podemos tener, la experiencia que se cuenta dentro de la película y la que nos produce a nosotros mismos.
So they weave together because of empathy, because of the story that they tell together and how that connects to each other and us as we watch.
Y entonces, ante eso pienso que la memoria que no es ni espacio ni tiempo, es no sé qué es, I don't know.
That leads him to talk about memory, which he's not sure how to relate to that. If it's space or time or both or neither, but memory is reconstructed.
Which is memory in this movie, in this micro movie, I don't know, microfilm.
Sí.
Porque la memoria creo que es capaz de to cross the seawall.
Memory crosses the seawall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant. Can I just respond? That's brilliant. They would love him at CalArts.
Yes, they love him everywhere.
It's amazing. That was amazing. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. You know, I learned so much about the process. You know, and my intention in making.
Slowly.
I learned so much about my intention in making the film is to have empathy for those 3 characters: grandmother, the grandchild, and the parent, the mom on the phone, but the absent parents. But the thing that's really important that you captured and you articulated, which is amazing, is what I tried to create is that other space for the audience. And that has to do, it's a cinematic style. There's a lot of pauses in the film, like long, almost awkward pauses where you're like, what's happening? That's a moment for the audience to insert themselves and think about your own connection, your own your family or whatever. And I think that's the point of art and film, you know, and that was the MFA program at CalArts. We focused on make an art didactic where it's not just for me to share my story of nostalgia and loss and pain, with my family, but also for you, the audience, to have a space, whether it's 5 seconds, right, to reflect and think about you, about your life, about your family, and in turn, that elicits empathy for you. So that's a cinematic tool. My background a little bit is in poetry with meters and pentameter, and so it's sort of like a rhythm that my editor, we all sort of figured out to kind of have pauses for the audience to kind of insert themselves. So very, very brilliant. Thank you. I'm glad you saw that.
So when, for example, one of those, I think you have different kinds of pauses. So you have pauses when there's almost a blank space in the screen, when there's a cut. But you also have pauses when you focus and stay on one image for a very long time. And for me, for example, there's 2 very key moments. One is when the grandmother is cutting the fish and she runs her finger along the knife. Yeah, she just does that. It's a very simple movement, but those of us who I spend as little time as possible in the kitchen, but I do spend time in the kitchen. And doing that with the knife, I usually end up, as my colleagues here know, I usually end up with my fingers all cut. But you do cut and burned. But doing that is something that's very much part of being. It's part of the action of preparing, of the ritual of preparing the food. So it's not just the need to cook or the need to eat, it's part of the ritual. Yes. So that slow focus you have on running her finger on the knife brings me into that ritual aspect of the food. And food is a point of encounter, always, I think. So food is always a point of encounter, it's always a point of construction, enables us to talk and relate to somebody else. So I think that's very important. And the other one that strikes me is also a moment of food, which is when the child I think I spoke to yesterday, when he's playing with his kalaloo, because she'd already set up this scene of the kalaloo as his favourite dish. And so either as parents or as children, we can remember what it's like to be given the opportunity to eat the favourite food. But he's already been scolded. She's angry with him, and so he can't enjoy it. So he's playing. He's playing with the food, and it falls off his spoon. And he doesn't say a word, but it's just so miserable. He looks so miserable and upset, and the meal is ruined. So that's the other side of the ritual. That it's kind of the ritual's broken.
It's broken.
So I think that's I found those really, really interesting moments.
Beautiful.
It's amazing with the microphone, because when I watch, thank you. When I watched the meal of Malachi, I could remember a meal when I was a child in Yucatecan Spanish is but negro is the meal. When I was a child, my mom made a meal. It was so delicious. So I think this memory is not mine, of course, but something in the movie, something in these images, in these movements, it's able to wake up my memory. For example, the charco, el charco.
The puddle of water.
Okay. The charco in the street when Malachi is walking around with friends after the school.
Like today.
Like today. Finally, thanks God. Yeah, I remember my house, my mom's house, for example. This is not my memory, but wake up another memory. Like the hilo.
The sewing together, the weaving.
Yeah. like a spider web.
Yeah. It's great. And I think it speaks to our connection, the connection with Caribbean culture. I think that's what's happening. I think what you're saying is great. It speaks to our connection in the diaspora. It speaks to, Guyana is part of South America, South American continent between Brazil and Venezuela. However, we share the cultural diaspora context with the rest of the Caribbean, Jamaica, and Belize, and Barbados, because we have a similar history of colonization. And even in Mexico, and there's a place that they're in Cuba, we all have similar cultural things and components and rituals and foods, and they even call it different things, but it's all sort of connected. And I think that's the great feedback that I get, like when we were in Havana, in Cuba, and now here in Mexico, Yucatan. Like, I feel connected, part of your culture, and I think that's the power of art and creating these types of films and literature, is to have this community.
One of the things that I've been asked in these last couple of days in relation to this seminar in general, and in particular the visit of Masson here, is why the Caribbean? Why we're working on the Caribbean? And the answer I've given each time is, well, because this is the region that we live in, and because I'm interested in working in my own region. And I think this film actually shows very clearly, and our reactions to it. Daniel says it's not his memory, but you're talking about your memories in the film. So it's not his memory, but he can relate to that memory because it wakes up something within him. Because, as you said, we are participating within a region that speaks a similar language. And we each speak, as Glisson would say, we each speak in a different language, but we hear each other in the same language, the same language of the Caribbean. So there's a visual language, an artistic language, an emotional language here that we all connect to, whether it's the cutting of the coconut or the cleaning of the fish, or my daughter's first words were cocos helados, coco helado, porque the cold coconut, because the coconut seller used to drive down the street on his bicycle selling coconuts, and that was the first words that she would hear. So the first words she spoke were cocos helados, and she would even sing it as the chant. So I have always had the coconuts. I always going to bring back a certain memories for me of being rooted here. So it becomes very clear to me that we are linked across the Caribbean region, and so it becomes very interesting also looking at the mainland Caribbean. With you and I, Guyana and Yucatan, ourselves here, we're all participating in a mainland Caribbean that isn't necessarily included in the same island Caribbean sense. So I think when we look from, it's very clear that in Guyana that they're going to look to the Caribbean islands, Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad.
Right.
But it's also really interesting to look north-south up through the mainland areas and how we have these this common regionality. I think it's very interesting, and I love the way the film speaks to that, and particularly the seawall. I don't know what you thought about how we have a big seawall in Progreso, in Malecón de Progreso, and Gabi is doing a lot of work in Cancun. We have one of our former students, when he started to work, he's from Cancun also, when he started to talk about, when he began to look at Caribbean literature, he couldn't understand what Cancun had to do with the Caribbean until he stood with his back to the sea and then looked inside. So I wonder if we could think a little bit more about the seawall, or if the seawall means anything to you, or the sea. I loved what Danielle said about memory crossing over the seawall. I don't know if you can expand any more on that. So para resumir un poco, me fascina la parte de lo que significa el malecón, ¿no? Por ejemplo, o es el Seawall, malecón, bueno, sí, ajá, sí, o la mirada al mar, o sea, sí.
Pensé en un muro de agua.
Ah, ok, bueno, es el muro contra el agua, entonces,
Okay.
o sea, he was thinking of a wall of water, like a wall of sea, not the wall against the sea, but
Right.
sí.
Por eso dije,
It's
Is there
there was another way.
there's an image of the Seawall.
Yeah.
Hay una imagen al principio cuando la abuela está caminando, ¿no? Sobre, bueno,
It's below Guyana. It's below
Below
sea
sea,
level.
yes.
So the wall is built so Guyana is below sea level at the earth.
está bajo de nivel
And
de mar.
so the wall was built to prevent from flooding when it would rain. So it's a wall against the sea to prevent flooding. So it becomes symbolic in the film as a wall of separation. Because I see the water as movement, and the water has history, and that's deep, people leave. And so the wall is a symbol of people that go beyond the water, beyond, and people come. It's a way of getting in and out. And so the wall is something that's...
Es como el malecón sería como el malecón, bueno, igual nuestro malecón de progreso, está construido también para que no entre el mar, ¿no? O en Chetumal, Cancún, creo que no lo tiene tan igual, ¿verdad? Sí.
No, porque Cancún tiene el arrecife, solo que ya está destruido. Pero bueno, yo en mis recuerdos de infancia, Cancún cuando se estaba construyendo estaba hundido. Todos los terrenos que existían estaban hundidos. Entonces la gente tenía que rellenar mínimo 3 metros para subir, porque cuando llovía eso se volvió un pantano. Y hasta hoy, a pesar de que es una ciudad con mucho drenaje, llueve, y como ahí llueve días seguidos, con una pala de lluvia, queda todo inundado. Mi casa incluso estaba como del nivel del piso, unos 5 bloques arriba, y solo así no se inunda, porque todas las casas alrededor se llenan de agua. Y hay una calle incluso que es pues está hundida, se llena hasta el tope, y la pobre gente que vive ahí se inunda horrible, y apesta.
Gaby's saying that Cancun has a similar situation. They don't build a big seawall like Guyana, but the houses are built up.
Yeah, we have that too. Yeah,
and they had to fill in the city, because it used to have the natural barrier of the reefs, the coral reefs, but they've been largely destroyed, and so that doesn't give them the protection. And the seawall in Havana el malecón in Havana is also very similar to this situation. Cuando tengan la oportunidad de estar en La Habana van a ver cómo las olas botan sobre esa, y es una imagen muy similar a la que está describiendo Masson en la película, ¿no? Con esas resonancias similares de que sí, en qué sentido frena o no el movimiento del agua hacia adentro y hacia afuera. O sea, in the same degree to see how much the water is stopped or not by the malecón, right? Yeah.
Because the water has movement, it's energy,
it's
energy, circadian rhythm, it's energy, it's water. As we know in literature and in film, there's so many meanings to water, and so that's the opening shot of the film, and that's something that kind of motivated me with the story.
Also, we have if we think again about Havana and San Juan, Puerto Rico, or Campeche, or Bacalar, many of our coastal seawalls were fortified against pirates, but that isn't the case in. Well, Guyana doesn't have the fortifications.
No.
Because that's another gives another resonance to the seawall story. Because here the seawalls are built against pirates and against the colonial power. Spain in this case would have built them against the English pirates and the French pirates.
I just wanted to make a statement just a comment to you, Margaret. I really just wanted to, on record, just say I really appreciate the work that you've been doing with the Caribbean diaspora in Mexico and with Guyana, my country. I mean, for many years, Guyana has been a country that's been overlooked, underlooked. People think it's in Africa, it's Ghana, and even traveling with the film,
Really?
I had to educate in France. The film was played in France at the Cannes Film Festival, and I had to explain every time, I'm not African, Guyana is in South America. So I really appreciate you, Margaret, for the work in writing that you're doing with the diaspora and the community, because I think it's really important to document our history and our story, and also, with this amazing audience, with your students, to continue this conversation. And I just have a feeling, I don't know where it's coming from, that something bigger is going to come out of this, the work that you're doing. And so thank you.
Well,
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, but I know this isn't the end of the conversation.
It's just
we're just sort of but thank you, because it actually does it. I love this seminar. I love the space of this seminar, and it's largely possible because of the students and the scholars that participate, and of course the people like yourself who are willing to come and spend a few days in Yucatan with us. And it really. It has been, and I hope it is able to continue a little bit longer, because we're getting towards the end of the financing, but we'll see. It really has been an amazing 2 years discussing the Caribbean with such a variety of different voices. But although if we just look at the list of topics and speakers, one would say how eclectic and how strange. But most of the time we've found there's an intense connection between all the speakers that we've had, and how we all are able to understand where we're each coming from, So, and I think the need to look at the region from different ways and let the voices be heard talking about ourselves, as you said so clearly yesterday, give the perspective. So it's different if you stand with your back to Cancun and look inwards, or if you stand in Yucatan and look south, instead of looking west to Mexico City. If you look south to Belize and Guyana, you find a different regionality that makes sense. So when people ask me why we work on the Caribbean, I say, well, that's because we're here. That's where we are. That's the region that makes sense for us. But you need to look in the right direction.
Yeah. We're all part of it.
Mike?
I have a question. I have a question about the sea, about the ocean.
Yes.
What means sea for you? What means?
What does the sea mean to you?
Wow,
yes.
That's a deep question.
It is a deep question.
Yeah. Like an ocean.
Like an ocean.
Like an ocean.
If I know Danielle well, there's a whole series of literary references beneath this sea that he's thinking about too.
Because I have an idea about the sea, about the ocean, but I appreciate your opinion about that.
What sea is to you?
It's good, yeah. The sea. What does the sea mean to me? The honest, immediate answer is the unknown. Mm-hmm. Depth, danger, dark.
Really?
Unknown, yeah, and that's how I've seen it.
Kalapani.
What's that?
The Kalapani, the Indian. Yeah.
Is that? Yeah. So
that's what the Indian call the unknown depths of the sea.
So in thinking about the story and and just my nostalgia, my perspective as a child, that's what I saw it as. I saw it as that, like the unknown and the bad thing, and people go, yeah, it's deep. Did you?
Well,
how do you see it?
How do you see the sea?
When I see the sea,
think of the sea,
the ocean, I think in a skin, a big skin. I don't know. Lo voy a decir en español, porque el pensamiento me da más trabajo construirlo en inglés. Cuando veo el mar, el océano, pienso en una gran piel.
When he thinks of the sea, he thinks of a big skin.
Oh.
Porque pienso en cada una de estas, de las islas, tanto del arco insular como del arco continental, unidas como bajo una piel.
So he thinks
Que
of,
no,
the Arc of Islands
no
and the Arc of
necesariamente,
mainland territories as if they were
no
bound together by a
necesariamente
skin.
como colores o no, porque no es el punto, sino como si fuese algo orgánico, unido y tejido.
Something organic that weaves them together.
Una de las cosas que me enseñó Maggie y siempre llevo conmigo es que Yucatán mira tanto a la nación, muy pocas veces, a la nación de Mexican Nation, muy pocas veces, y mira también hacia el mar Caribe, como el Toloc que mira hacia el Caribe.
So one of the things that we used to talk about, came out of my PhD thesis, was how Yucatan, being this peninsula at the edge of Mexico, how it sometimes looks towards the nation, towards the center of the country, towards Mexico City, but frequently, more often, or in a pendular kind of movement, looks also towards the sea, looks towards the Caribbean.
Y por eso,
So he described it as the peninsula, as the head of an iguana moving into the Caribbean Sea.
y Maya Toloc. Por eso, cuando, regreso a la película, cuando escucho a estas personas hablar, quizá no entienda su lenguaje, no comparta no su lenguaje, su lengua, no comparta la lengua, el código para hablarlo, pero siento, I feel something under the language.
So he says when he watches the film, he doesn't necessarily understand, he hasn't got the code to understand the language they're speaking, but beneath that he... ¿Lo puedes repetir, perdón?
Sí, siento, hay algo debajo de la lengua.
There's a language he can feel.
Debajo. Recuerdo, por ejemplo, a Bradway diciendo que hablando sobre la unidad submarina, a todo aquello que está por debajo, que no ha sido dicho, que no había tenido una voz, que no la tiene a veces y que a veces no la necesita. Yo creo.
He's recalling, again, I mentioned the poet Kamal Brathwaite from
Yes.
He said in an article in the 70s, unity is submarine. So it's not necessary, in the Caribbean,
Right.
unity is beneath.
It's beneath.
It's beneath. So because colonialism hides, it destroys the what's on the surface, so the unity has to happen underneath. And so that's in the Caribbean Sea. So in
That's what he says.
Finalmente, ¿no? Entonces cuando pienso en océano y pienso en la gente que vive en estos fragmentos de tierra unidos por el océano, a final de cuentas,
So he thinks of the people and sees them as part of beneath the sea, the unity beneath the sea. So the sea is unity, not necessarily fragmentation or rupture.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yes?
Sí, pienso que, nuestra historia como región es casi a través de la literatura, del arte, es como una gran autobiografía. No sé.
El océano? No.
No, cuando piensas la gente produciendo literatura, arte, pintura, todo este tipo de expresiones, pienso en una gran autobiografía, que es algo que no yo me saqué de manga, lo dijo Luis Román Sánchez, acerca de los puertorriqueños. ¿No? Los puertorriqueños tienden a la autobiografía, pero pienso que todos nosotros.
So the art and literature that's produced is an autobiography of the region. Something that the Puerto Rican writer Luis Rafael Sánchez said about Puerto Rican writing in particular, but Daniel thinks it applies to the region, how we write we tell the autobiography of the region. Which is a little bit like your autofiction.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you a PhD student?
Not yet.
Are you getting a PhD?
Que pregunta si eres un estudiante de doctorado.
No.
Because I think
Maestría.
he's
He's studying his master's in history. So.
Yeah. I think the analogy with the sea that's really for me, I can connect to it, and it's really empowering. It's elevating my thought and my creativity, right?
Está diciendo que le interesa mucho tu analogía del mar como una piel, que lo entiende, lo comprende y se siente empoderado por esa propuesta.
Because we describe it in sort of two different ways. Like mine is sort of like the unknown, it's dark, I don't want to go there, it's enigmatic.
Describen el mar ustedes dos de una forma muy diferente. Él lo describe como algo profundo y enigmático que le da terror.
And this is a little bit more optimistic, and it's just unity. It connects. It extends, it expands.
Y su mar es expansivo, optimista, unificador.
And so what I'm taking from it is evolving my sort of understanding of this dark, enigmatic, unknown thing, and looking and seeing where that perspective, right? And then thinking about conquering that and seeing it more. Because I think, fear is something that we don't want to be afraid of the unknown. They say that when there's something you're afraid of, you must go through it. Through it and not, So I'm going to think more about that. But that's really, it's kind of brilliant. Thank you.
Un poco brillante. No, bastante brillante.
I'm going to do some reading on that. That's good. I like it.
René, ¿quieres comentar? No estás obligado a comentar si quieres comentar. O Jorge. Mientras René vaya pensando. Part of the active audience.
Bueno, me gustó la película, el film, porque siento que logró congeniar, salirse de la experiencia y crear, como ya había mencionado, algo universal.
So he found the film interesting because, as we've already kind of said, you were able to move out of the personal experience into the universal experience.
Y creo que eso es algo complicado de lograr.
It's
a nivel
difficult to
artístico,
achieve.
es muy difícil. Entonces valoro mucho cómo se produjo como tal, me gustó mucho. Y habían tanto las imágenes que se hacían, los fotogramas, porque me parecían muy poéticos. Algunos, por ejemplo, el de la luna.
Just, you can,
yeah.
You understand?
No.
I was forgetting I had to translate. So he's saying he's interested in how it was produced because it's again similar to the comment yesterday that it seems very fluid, the way, and the photographic images were very well chosen. He describes them as poetic. Voy a agregar un pedacito nada más para que sepa el contexto de llamarlo poético, porque tú eres poeta, ¿no? Entonces, I think it's interesting here how each of the participants reveals where they're coming from. So, Jorge is a very good writer. He's a very good poet, and he's won some prizes locally as a poet. So it's interesting to me that he responds as a poet to your film and uses poetic image, as a way to describe it. So.
Sí, y la imagen de la luna con la palmera me recordó a un poema de un autor español que se llama Miguel Hernández, en el libro Belice en Luna.
So he's saying that the image of the moon with the palm tree going across it reminds him of a poem by a Spanish poet called Miguel Hernández.
Que hablaba sin hablar de la luna o del mar y hacía esas imágenes. Entonces se me hizo muy, muy bello, ¿no? Porque son fotogramas y había movimiento, y creo que es algo muy difícil de lograr movimiento en una imagen. Como Octavio Paz diría, el movimiento, la fijeza siempre es momentánea, ¿no? pero
Espérate, no puedo traducir todo eso. René, ayúdame. So he's saying the photogram, is that a photograma? ¿Cómo se dice?
un álbum, pues, ¿no? De imagen,
Como photographic scene, yeah.
Cinematic scene.
Each cinematic scene. So the moon, it contained movement. I mean, with the palm tree going across it, it brings the movement into a static image. So, ¿está correcto? Que el movimiento de la palma sobre la luna introduce el movimiento en una imagen fijo.
Sí, exactamente. ¿Sí? Es como el pensamiento de Octavio Paz que decía que la fijeza es siempre momentánea.
So the Mexican poet Octavio Paz used to say that stillness is always momentary. The moment is that still moment of time. Yeah.
Y creo que es o sea, artísticamente todo el film y socialmente produce un impacto muy grande que yo creo que tendría que verlo de nuevo y asimilar cada imagen, cada contexto, porque los personajes igual se desarrollan psicológicamente distinto a todos, ¿no? Entonces, como decía el compañero, de la memoria. La memoria es algo espacio-temporal y en donde
So he's saying that he'd need to see it again because it creates a great depth of feeling within him, but he wants to see it again. But how he finds it interesting also how each of the characters develops psychologically, even within such a small space, right? And then again, picking up on what Danielle was saying about memory and how memory is a space-time dynamic.
Sí, y también la memoria es una experiencia psicológica.
And memory is also a psychological experience.
Y
so I can speak to the process. Was that the question?
Yeah, well, it hasn't actually. No, hay una pregunta o todavía no. Está como. Sí, o sea, yes, you can speak to it, but yeah.
Musicalmente igual. Además de la sensación que producían los personajes como tal y la música de fondo como que congeniaba muy bien. Entonces no sé eso.
Again, that combination of how the music also fits in with the. He's not formulating it as a question, but there is a question there to be. There is a reply to this. To how you could talk about the process. Te puede hablar un poco del proceso de cómo logra esos efectos. Él te podría hablar.
That's what he's talking about, essentially.
Sobre el proceso de cómo se produce y concebir esas. Sí. Yes, would like to hear that.
Well, I appreciate that you recognize that one moment, that scene with the moon and the palm tree. That was actually a shot that we just had. We were there on set, and the camera was rolling, and it was raining. We were waiting, and someone turned the camera on, and it happened. And it was just in the pile. We had 7 hours of footage, and for 9 minutes. And so in editing, I remember looking at him. I was so frustrated and looking at him, and it just gave me like a breath of like hope that I could finish the film. And so I was like, we have to put this moment, because it wasn't planned. So,
está explicando que bueno, para quedar con estos 9 minutos editados, filmaron más de 7 horas de film, de película. Y entraba en momentos muy desesperados porque pensé, aquí no hay nada, o sea, ¿qué puedo sacar? Y encontraron esa imagen de la luna un poco, no era planeado, no era una toma que habían planeado tomar. Estaban en el set. Estaban en el set y estaba lloviendo. Alguien prendió la cámara y se tomó. Entonces, cuando lo encontró, dentro de esas 7 horas, le representó un momento de esperanza, ¿no? Que pudo, esa pausa que creo que tú estás mencionando, ¿no? It's a little bit like that pause, that stillness. It represented that movement in the stillness that gave you the hope.
Yeah, and it told me, it was the perfect shot moment to tell the emotion of that and I empathized, connected with that shot, that moment.
Because it's a moment of pause in the film
Yeah.
as well, isn't it? Yeah. Es un
And
momento de
change.
pausa, de cambio en la película también.
There was lightning, pending storm, change, transition. But
Relámpagos, cambio, transformación de la escena, ¿no?
Y cuando comienza la abuela a
Es-
desesperarse.
Sí, sí.
Sí.
it was a magic. It was happy. It was an accident, but it was great. I just wanted to talk about briefly
Yes.
the process of making a film. They say a film is made 3 times. It's made the first time with the script, because I wrote a script. You write down what was expected.
Dice
So-
que se hace una película en 3 momentos. Primero el guión, cuando escribes lo que piensas o lo que quieres hacer, ¿no?
The second time is when you're on set, on production. So you have the script, you take the script and you shoot, and then anything can happen. So this where the documentary component of the film came. It rained one day, so we had the puddle shots. We didn't plan that. You know, different things happen on set. So the script has changed, it has a new form.
So, la segunda
Parte.
parte es cuando ya estás en el set y vas a grabar, pero en ese contexto, aunque tienes el script de lo que el guión de lo que se debe de hacer, pero cualquier cosa puede suceder, como por ejemplo esa escena de la luna o esas escenas cuando llovía, ¿no? Con los charcos que tú mencionas, eso no estaba en el guión, pero ocurrió, ¿no? Durante la filmación.
And the third part is the editing. So once we have everything, you have to look at, this is where the poetry comes in. You have all the shots, you look at the moment, you think about the script, you think about, and then you have to create the final thing. So that's what that is. It took months to put it all together.
So, la tercera etapa es la edición, ¿no? Y dice, ahí entra la poesía, ¿no? Esa es la etapa poética, porque revisas todo lo que tienes, cotejas con el guión del plan, tienes todas las imágenes y vas recreando la historia que quieres tomar. Entonces, es ahí donde va es la poesía, ¿no?
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
I love it. I can't wait. Oh.
On record.
Tuve una reflexión después de lo que dijo Daniel acerca de que el mar representa como una membrana, pues.
Esa es una mejor, sí, es una muy buena palabra para usar, membrana, ¿verdad?
Como una membrana celular, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Y creo entonces que...
Es médico.
Mira, y entonces espacios como este representan los poros entre esas membranas,
Genial.
¿verdad?
Ay, qué bonito. Let me translate because it's beautiful. We're deep. It's so important to know where people come from, right? So
Yes.
Renee is from a medical background.
Yes.
Works in hospital. So Renee is developing the skin image to a membrane,
Oh.
an organic membrane, and saying that with the people within us, within the membrane, we're the pores.
Oh.
So that's yes.
Y creo que entonces como una membrana selectivamente deja entrar y salir diferentes elementos, pues en este caso hace disparar diferentes ideas entre todos nosotros como si nosotros fuéramos todos nucleos, ¿verdad? Y
So
estuviéramos
membrane
produciendo.
selectively lets different things come in and out. So that's like the idea is the bounce in and out of the membrane.
Yeah.
Y a la misma vez creo que espacios como este permiten que se comparta una idea universal a través del mundo, right? Una idea universal que se ilumina con esa luz de la luna como cuando filman, pues.
So that I continue the idea of the membrane and how we're bouncing around within it. It allows ideas that to become universal or world-based, shared.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You're right. It's interesting how we come from different perspectives.
Exactly. Yeah.
We see it.
Well, that's going back. I mean, that's why I wanted the seminar to be. It has in it transdisciplinary because it's and it started off with this big discussion of whether it's multi or inter, and I said no, I wanted to be trans because there's a it activates the discussion between the different disciplines. It moves. So It's not just the bouncing around of multi-disciplinary ideas. It's how they connect with each other to transform and to make something else. So that's why I wanted it to be transdisciplinary.
Yes. Yes.
That's really interesting how the membrane and the skin.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Looking at what the.
That's la membrana funciona.
Sí,
No, she's inspired.
pero
You're inspired. Estás inspirado, pero.
You seem inspired.
Los que creo que funciona muy bien. Gracias. Funciona muy bien la idea de la membrana, le decía a René, porque como él menciona, las membranas son selectivas, dejan pasar o no dejan pasar, entrar o no entrar, al final de cuentas se debe al flujo, ¿no? A los poros que menciona. Sí es esta piel, pero hacia adentro, hacia lo más pequeño, hacia estas pequeñas realidades, ¿no? Sociales, políticas, económicas, que
serían esos poros.
Que estarían esos poros. O sea, entiendo que todos estos fragmentos de tierra, tanto continentales como insulares, funcionan como nodos, núcleos, poros, y cada una tiene una realidad diferente, ¿no? Ya pensando...
So each of these fragments of islands and spaces and territories and their specific social realities and political conditions, they're all these pores that relate together.
Okay,
so
yeah.
We often go to very organic and natural ways of explaining the Caribbean as well. Yeah? So this is again,
Yes.
it fits more with the manglar.
Sí.
With the mangrove idea, understanding the Caribbean as a mangrove or as a hurricane.
Ya pensando con estos vicios de historiador, de las realidades socioeconómicas, sociopolíticas, pues cada lugar, cada país, cada nación o estado sin nación, como le llaman a Puerto Rico, por ejemplo, los de Guyana, pues o sea, hay realidades a las que nos tenemos que enfrentar de vida, de experiencias ante la construcción de las naciones, la construcción de las evidencias económicas. Todo eso sí influye también en nuestra empatía, creo, en nuestra construcción de... Perdón.
I can't remember all this.
Sorry.
So instead of saying it now that he studied literature here, but he's studying to become a historian now, so he has a different baggage that goes around in his head, and so he's thinking about all the socio-economic, political, cultural elements that also affect our empathy, affect the way we react and how do we understand and how we empathize.
Le mencionaba a René, our reality is multiply, unidad diversa.
The diversity of our diverse unity, which is a kind of contradiction, but
It's a contradiction, but it's choice. No?
Yeah. I think that's the beauty. Yeah, that's the beauty of it and the power of it. Yeah, is that we're different, but yeah.
Frequently, we end up talking about the Caribbean as diversity, as unity with diversity, because the Caribbean has so many differences, but this underlying commonality. So we end up explaining it by that unity of difference. Arif, ¿quieres comentar algo? Estás bienvenido. ¿Pudiste ver la película?
Sí, el Seawall.
Sí.
Bueno, en mi apreciación, pues es bastante interesante todo lo que tras los movimientos migratorios, ¿no? Desde países que están en conflicto, cuestiones políticas, o sea, cómo son los medios para poder buscar algo mejor, ¿no? O sea, siempre son la escuela, el arte, o sea, todas las cosas que en algunos países pues solo está localizado a ciertos estratos sociales, pues eso lo hace un poco inaccesible, ¿no? Sin embargo, pues es admirable el hecho de que pues, a algunos les cuesta más lograrlo, pero sin embargo los medios ahí están, ¿no? Se puede lograr.
He's interested in the portrayal of the social and economic differences that enable, that are behind migration, that, you know, education, status, economic status, that enables you to be able, that means you can or cannot migrate. And so, again, that's part of the story about who's left behind and who goes. But I think one of the interesting things about when we talk about who's left behind, is something that certainly was made clear to me when I was in Guyana, was that people choose to stay. You know, we often focus on, as you said, we often focus on the people who choose to leave because they're going to something, air quotes, better. But people choose to stay.
Yes.
And that's a very important part of the story.
Yes. And thank you for your question. Historically, when Guyana became independent from Britain 53 years ago, the textbooks will say that the educated class, people who can afford, fled the country.
So está diciendo que históricamente cuando Guyana se independizó de Inglaterra hace 53 años, decían que era la clase educada, la élite que pudo irse, que se aprovechaban para salir del país, ¿no? Eso era la historia oficial, ¿no? Que los educados abandonan y se deja un país empobrecido, pero ese no es el caso.
And people went to New York, to London, Toronto, like major cities, and fled. And I think what's happening now is that people are starting to go back to Guyana, to migrate back to Guyana.
So, la gente se iba a Nueva York, a Londres, a Toronto, se migraban, y ahora estamos con una situación de la migración de vuelta, ¿no? Que la gente ahora está retornando, que la gente retorna a Guyana, como ha sido el caso de Masson, que regresa y encuentra de nuevo con su país, ¿no?
So lastly, it is finance thing. So you need money to be able to immigrate out, and then
sí está vinculado con el aspecto económico, porque obviamente necesita uno el dinero para entrar o salir, para moverse.
But oftentimes what happens is you move to a city like New York and you may be well off in Guyana and you're living in poverty, but you're living in America, in the United States. And then so people work really hard and then they try to come back to Guyana, or they send money back and they sacrifice and they live like the mother, they live very, modestly and send money back to relatives there.
So, la ilusión de que es dinero que te permite ir, no es exactamente así. En muchos casos la gente puede vivirse bien en Guyana, se migran a Nueva York, pero ahí van a vivir muy humildemente, tienen que trabajar duro para poder generar una manera de vivir mejor, de ahorrar y volver o enviar el dinero a casa, ¿no? Como es el caso de muchos yucatecos mexicanos que se migran al norte, ¿no? Pueden estar bien acá, no súper bien tal vez, una necesidad de migrar, se migran, se encuentran en condiciones casi peores al principio, tienen que trabajar duro, ya sabemos muy bien el catálogo de desastre que hay para los migrantes en Estados Unidos, sobre todo hoy en día, ¿no? Entonces una de las cosas que creo que está diciendo Masson, perdón que elaboro un poquito más, lo de la migración no es tan sencillo como soy rico, educado y me voy, ¿no? Porque al salir no necesariamente te quedas como estabas, ¿no? Entonces hay sacrificios en el proceso, ¿no?
Si eres rico, educado en un espacio, pero en otro no.
En otro no, exacto, sí. So in one space you can be wealthy and educated, but you go to another one and it's not the case. So there's this illusion, of wealth behind migration, which is a falsity in many cases, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
And that's one of the things again, it's interesting, the film doesn't show one of the other absence, well, that big absence that we haven't really talked about, Danielle talked about the absence of the parents. And that absence, I think, is very important because it doesn't idealize. The absence of the parents enables the film to not idealize the place of migration, the place they're migrating to. It leaves a big question mark over what is going to happen, what the life he's going to.
Because it's his perspective.
He doesn't know.
Because we had scenes. It's his perspective, and he doesn't know. And the character, empathizing with Malachi's story, he doesn't know.
Sure.
And so he knows his grandmother is there. He knows he gets his favorite food. He knows he gets to play cricket with his friends.
O sea, esa interrogación está porque estamos viéndolo desde la perspectiva del niño. Entonces el niño no sabe lo que va a ver ahí, sabe lo que tiene acá con la abuela, con sus comidas favoritas, con jugar cricket, con lo familiar, pero no sabe lo que viene. Entonces por eso es ausente.
So we had other scenes with the mother talking about her life. She's working as a home care worker, not making a lot of money. She took a long time to save up enough money to send for him, and there was a lot of backstory with her living very rough and poor in the United States. It never made it to the film.
Que filmaron también muchas escenas con la madre en Estados Unidos y ella estaba trabajando. How was she working as
a home care worker,
as a
home care attendant.
Como una enfermera doméstica, y habla, o sea, mucha conversación con ella sobre lo difícil que era juntar el dinero para traer el niño, todo eso, ¿no? Pero eso no lo incluyeron en la película, ¿no? Y bueno, ahí está la pregunta, ¿por qué? So why? I mean, I think I know why I wouldn't put it in, but why didn't you put it in?
I didn't put it in because of what I said in response earlier to choosing the younger generation and then the older. I wanted to kind of, because we know that story a little bit of the middle sort of part of the family. You go and you work and you sacrifice for your kids to send your kid. So I wanted to focus on the young and the old.
So en parte decidió no ponerlo porque la historia de la madre, la persona que se va, trabaja duro, se hace el sacrificio, es muy conocido. Es la historia de cómo se hizo América, ¿no? O sea, Estados Unidos, cómo trabajas duro y sales adelante, ¿no? Entonces, en respuesta a lo que dijo a Gaby sobre el nieto, ¿no? Y la juventud, la visión joven, quería enfocarse en la visión de esa generación en particular. ¿Y qué pasa cuando se van? Porque crea esa nueva ruptura con la discontinuidad de la historia. So you also focusing, as you said to Gabby, when focusing on the young generation, you create a new question about what happens when he goes and the discontinuity of the history. Yeah.
Yes. And in the feature film, there's a lot more with the mother, and Malachi is now an adult, and he goes back, and then we see some of this stuff, you know. So
actually, that's something we haven't mentioned to this group. We haven't really. No hemos hablado mucho con ustedes, lo hablamos ayer y estamos cruzando las versiones. Masson está trabajando sobre The Seawall para convertirlo en un largometraje. Entonces, pues eso sí. No, creo que lo mencionaste muy brevemente al principio en la presentación, pero como si ya sabíamos. Entonces, yo sí, pero ellos no. Entonces, creo que sería muy importante escuchar, o sea, cuáles son los... Una vez hicimos, no sé si con todos ustedes, una vez hicimos un ejercicio en la clase, ahorita te lo busco eso para mí, sobre, hablando sobre su tesis, creo que con ustedes, hablando sobre la tesis con 1 minuto, con 5 minutos y con 20 minutos, ¿no? ¿Sí? Y resultó muy fácil explicar la tesis en el poquito tiempo, pero cuando aumentamos, tenía la dificultad cada uno de ustedes de cómo seleccionar las partes para ejemplificar y ampliar, porque de repente había mucho tiempo, ¿no? No se puede contar todo, pero ya hay una gama mucho más amplia de ejemplos que podemos dar, entonces cómo seleccionamos. Entonces creo que habría tal vez una situación paralela, cómo transformamos un corto ¿Cómo transformamos? ¿Cómo vamos de 9 minutos a 90 minutos? O, I think it's a bit longer.
102. It's 102 pages.
Right. ¿Cómo vamos de 9 minutos a 102 minutos? So what I was saying was that one time, they're fascinated with how you go from, well, and I'm fascinating, I'm kind of making the question for them, how you go from 9 minutes to 102 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I said that it's a bit like an exercise I did with them when they were students. I said, you talk about your thesis in 3 minutes
Yeah.
and in 20 minutes. They were fine on the short time, but when you get to expand, how do you select the examples and how do you not dilute the essence, but still give the examples because you've got all this space? So how have you transformed the story?
That's a tough question. It's a tough process. It's been 5 years.
5 años del proceso.
And because I've gone back to Guyana, I've spent time, I've interviewed my grandmother, I've dealt with my father. I've started to focus on the character. Each character in the short. How do I'm in writing. I wrote like background stories for all the characters. The mother. That's the
Empezó a trabajar con los personajes y escribir la historia detrás de cada uno de ellos y ver conectar con las posibles historias del padre que no aparece aquí y entrevistar a la abuela.
So that was first, the characters, because the characters drive the story. And then the next thing I start thinking about, what is the overall message and motif and theme that I want to expand upon? Immigration and family, abandonment, father, like all those things.
So, luego pensar en cuál es el mensaje o el tema principal que quiere expandir. Es inmigración, familia, padre.
And then I started to do an outline. Like I started to write. I did, write the story.
O sea, que empiece a escribir el bosquejo de la historia.
And now I'm in version 10 of editing, and I have producers and people reading, and I had a table read 2 years ago. I had actors read the version, and I see if I visualize it, if it makes sense, what resonates with me.
So, ya está en la versión 10 y así también ejercicios como hace 2 años hizo una lectura con actores que leen lo que entonces ellos leen y él trata de visualizar lo que esas palabras están construyendo y a ver si funciona con lo que él quiere.
And the big thing with the process, I ask myself, is, am I able to accomplish the empathy and the connection to the characters in an hour and a half as much as I did in 9 minutes? And so
la pregunta que se hace a sí mismo siempre es si está logrando conectar con los personajes y crear la empatía a través de los personajes con la misma intensidad que hizo en 9 minutos a través de esos 102. O sea, si está funcionando ese nivel de empatía.
Yeah, so it's a battle. It's an ongoing thing, and so I'll let you explain that. So I check in. Is it visual? Is it poetic? And you just write. You write and you take a risk. And
eso es importante. Es una lucha, es un proceso constante y te tomas un salto, un riesgo, un salto de fe, ¿no? Ese salto a la creatividad. A leap into creativity.
Yeah. Yeah. And the final thing I will say is that, I, as an artist, I have to go to a real place and I ask myself, am I telling the truth? Am I telling the truth for Malachi? Am I telling the truth for the grandmother? Am I telling the truth for the mother? And am I telling the truth for the diaspora? Am I telling the truth for Guyana? Am I telling the truth? So it's a constant process of the creative me, like what am I doing? And then I think about the world that like how is this the outside? So it's like a very internal and external kind of like process. And I think we're close to getting featured.
Es un proceso que lucha adentro y afuera consigo mismo porque va preguntando constantemente si está encontrando esa verdad de cada uno de los personajes del país, de esas verdades que quiere contar. Ahora, yo tengo una pregunta. So, how do you convey or represent so many truths. But they're not all your truths. The truth is, you mentioned now, you said, am I telling my truth? Okay. And then you said, am I telling the grandmothers and the grandchild's and Guyana's? So how do you separate out or weave together that variety of, that richness of truths that you can't speak for all of them?
Well, it goes.
How can you speak for all of them?
It kind of goes through that process. Like we talked about the process. How do you make a film that's based on your memory and your experience, and it's autobiographical? I think in working on the film for so long, I worked through sort of my stuff, and it's no longer my film. It's no longer my story. It's now Malachi's story. So I write the characters not based on people that I know in my life. They're now living. They now have their own thing, and I tell their truth. So it's sort of a cathartic. Before, like the short was more like me sort of telling what memory, and I think in a feature, it's been intense because I've had to remove myself from the character to give them permission to do things that I wouldn't do. So the Malachi adult character you see in the film is not necessarily me anymore.
Se ha pasado por un proceso, perdón, te voy a interrumpir, porque si no voy a I'm going to interrupt you because I won't remember them.
I know.
Se ha pasado por un proceso en el cual los personajes, él ha evolucionado a través de sus personajes para que ya cada uno es independiente de él. Entonces el Malachi adulto ya no es necesariamente Masson, ¿no? O sea, cada uno vive en su escenario. Entonces cuando le preguntamos cómo construye la verdad de cada uno de esos, es porque ya no son sus verdades, son las verdades de cada uno de los personajes que ha empezado a vivir solos. Como recuerdo José María Arguedas, que ustedes saben que me fascina, que cuando escribió su última novela, la de los zorros de arriba y los zorros de abajo, que entra inicialmente en la novela, en uno de los diarios, cuando está contando cómo crea la novela, dice, se me están escapando los zorros. O sea, como si ya no los controlo yo, ellos son personajes y cuentan su propia historia, están libres, ¿no? Entonces, no sé cómo ustedes que son creadores, yo no lo sé, no sé cómo el autor llega a ese proceso de que se independicen de sus personajes.
That's good. That sounds good.
I don't know how, I don't do creative writing, so I don't know how as a writer or as a filmmaker you reach that stage when your characters can be independent of you.
It's great.
But it reminded me of there's a Peruvian writer who I'm very attached to, who died, committed suicide many years ago. And he, on his last novel, he said that my zorros, my foxes, are running away from me. They are becoming independent of me as a writer, and they're telling their own story. And he weaves that into the novel. And it's always been something that's fascinated me, but I don't know how you do it as a writer.
It's crazy. It's very intense. Like, it's very dark. It can be dark, but I look at it. You look at it in two ways. Like, you have to. For me, I approach it from two ways. Like, I can get into the characters and sort of think the way they would think, and visualize people, sometimes 2 or 3 people that I know, and put them into one trait, and then some of me, and I just write like that. And then you there's a creative part where you just kind of write, and it just kind of goes, it just kind of flows. Then you stop. Then you look at it as an editor, as an outside constructive person. Like, what is this person doing objectively? And then you go back and forth. So you're creating, and then you edit, and you create again.
Voy a tratar de resumir. Dice que es un proceso en 2 partes. Una parte es muy subjetiva, cuando tú te metes adentro del personaje y empiezas a ponerte en sus pies y empiezas a visibilizar su mundo, su verosimilitud. Y la segunda parte más externa, objetiva, cuando lo observas como editor y tomas un paso atrás y o sea, observas el funcionamiento de esas decisiones. ¿Correcto?
It's good. It's not fun. It's hard.
I hope I'm not missing. I think I'm missing bits here, but.
Concuerdo igual con Masson porque o sea, es un premio. Concuerdo porque, como como dicen, ¿no? La escritura no es un estado emotivo como tal, subjetivo, o sea, sí subjetivo, ¿no? Pero más es un estado de conciencia.
He says the state of writing is a state of consciousness. Yeah.
Entonces igual es un proceso similar a lo que hace Masson. Entonces creo que tal vez por eso siento que ha estado como corregido, muy editado. Entonces se ve que ha trabajado demasiado en el film. 9 minutos parece poco, pero lleva demasiado tiempo. Entonces se ve, ¿no? Se aprecia.
He's a writer.
He's a writer.
He's a writer.
He's
Yeah.
a writer. He's a poet. Yes.
Yeah.
You can tell.
I can tell. Yeah. So he loves it. It's like it's intense. It's like.
Sí, habla mucho de la intensidad de ese proceso de meterse en los personajes.
Pues es lo mismo que la teoría, ¿no?
He says, well, he says, in defense of theory, he says, well, it's the same with
It's the
theory.
same with the theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. Porque, pues, también hay un proceso de entrar y salir de la teoría, de la crítica literaria.
There's a process of immersing yourself
Right.
in and then coming out of
Yeah.
the theory to
Absolutely.
be able to reuse it.
Reconstruir la historia de un pueblo o de una persona. Entonces necesitas ponerte en los zapatos de gente, de personas que viven, que sienten.
Ya hablando como historiador.
Sí,
Sí.
ya hablando.
And now talking as a historian, he says if you're going to tell the story, the history of a place, a community, you have to put yourself in the shoes of those people.
Absolutely.
Igual con la literatura, ¿no? De quién escribe, para quién escribe y las representaciones. Las representaciones dentro de la literatura no son simples construcciones estéticas, como tampoco lo son en el filme. Es como decirlo, es esta, no me gusta la palabra esencia, pero funciona, ¿no? Esta esencia, esta reminiscencia del yo, de nosotros, a través de un medio, a través de una proyección en papel, en video, poesía, en teoría. Siempre creo que se trata de crear siempre, ¿no? Crear nuevas formas de leer el mundo.
In resuming, in summary, it's whether it's theory or whether it's not, whether it's poetry or visual mediums, it's still a way of connecting the I to us in a creative.
Sí.
No me considero creador, lo intenté y fallé.
He says he doesn't consider himself a creator.
Sí, y siempre me gusta mucho escuchar a las personas que escriben literatura, que la hacen, que hacen poesía, que hacen película, que pintan. Y me gusta tratar de llevar esto al plano, ¿no? Del concepto, de la teoría.
He says he very much enjoys talking with creators, whether painters, filmmakers, writers, and he takes that onto a conceptual, abstract level as a creative theorist.
A creative theorist.
Yo te llamé un teórico creativo. Creador,
Yeah.
un teórico creador.
Yeah.
Sí, es fascinante. Creo que es el mejor término de creative theorist.
Creative theorist.
Yeah. And I appreciate the conversation because it makes me think. Like the water, I'm like, oh yeah. And then I can go back into my cocoon and start coming up with stuff, and then I can start.
We have a question from the Facebook audience.
They've been here the whole time.
Some of them have. Hello, I'm Ana Cervera. I haven't been paying attention. Hello, I'm Ana Cervera, and I follow you on Facebook Live. I didn't see the video because we couldn't show it, but I would like to know about the travel, how people build memories of migrations. Particularly, she's thinking of 3 moments: before travel, during travel, and when they take the decision to stay in a permanent way. Thank you, and congratulations to everybody.
Wow. So thank you for checking in and asking that question. So that's pretty interesting, thinking about the power of 3, like the 3 moments: travel, of immigration.
Se acabó la mano, no importa. La Facebook todavía.
Sí, estoy.
Facebook still?
It was still Facebook, yes.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
yes, yes.
So in the first part of, you said before travel, like I think what happens in that process is the moment of uncertainty, and maybe some optimism, uncertainty of like you're not sure what will happen. I think that's what we saw in film during, I guess it could be some anticipation of what you know, of what's to come. But I think throughout the whole process, there's a level of uncertainty of what is happening in terms of immigration. And then when you get there, there's the reality in migration.
Nada más para traducir brevemente. La primera, o sea, le agradece mucho la pregunta sobre las tres etapas. Y la primera etapa es una especie de incertidumbre, ¿no? Que vemos particularmente se centra en esa parte en la película donde el niño está rodeado por incertidumbre, ¿no? La segunda etapa es esa, la llegada es la certidumbre, ¿no?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's it. And I think for each person, it can be different depending on what's planned for your situation. But I think until you're in your new situation, there's uncertainty. But once you're there, the reality sets in about whatever it is your situation is. I think that's the key thing to think about.
Así que cuando llegas a esa parte de la certidumbre, cuando llegas y te estableces, eso es cuando nos encontramos en esa nueva realidad, como si la realidad nos golpea.
Yeah, because we're not sure. Yeah,
sure. And then there's a third. What was she said? So the before, during, and why they just and then when you arrive, and then deciding to stay in a permanent place.
Oh, deciding to stay.
Because you might not decide to stay.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, people arrive and then don't stay, but maybe that certainty or that reality that hits you doesn't become certain, doesn't create that certainty. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that depends on the situation, the scenario, whatever you're in. Like the decision to stay, it depends on what's happening currently, and then what have you left behind. Like, is this new situation better than what I had behind? Do that. Thank you.
Que tal vez tenga que ver con las circunstancias de la salida, que fueron las circunstancias que provocaron la salida en el primer lugar, y cuáles son las de la nueva realidad que encuentras. Maybe also if the networking that you find when you get many migrants migrate to family networks, social networks, communities already in place. Maybe would that have to do with why they stay or why they don't stay?
Yeah, I think particularly in the U.S. in the United States, when people come to the U.S., there's usually a neighborhood or a town. Like there's Little Guyana in Queens, New York, Richmond Hill. So there's Guyanese food, there's Guyanese people, so it's like a microcosm of what you left behind. So if you have that community in the family or things that are familiar, I think you're more likely to stay than if you're in some place where you're not supported.
Así que preguntamos cómo funcionarían las redes de compadrazgo que se encuentran en las situaciones de llegada. Entonces digo sí, por ejemplo, en el caso de la pequeña Guyana en Queens, en Nueva York, y ahí te vas a encontrar con la comida familiar, los escenarios de situaciones, las vivencias familiares, y eso contribuye a la posibilidad de quedarse. Mason, we talked a little yesterday about a similar situation of networking, but in reverse, with the case of Cuba and Guyana. So reverse migration to Guyana, not from Guyana in this case. And how would you like to talk a little bit more about that, perhaps?
Yeah, with Cuba, that's interesting. Well, that's sort of happening. You mean with Guyanese people going back to Guyana?
No, I was thinking about Cubans migrating to Guyana to get in the visa situations.
Oh,
and then
right.
and a little Cuba in Guyana, rather than rather than a little Guyana in New York.
Right. I'm not sure what to say about it, but
okay.
Yeah, but that's happening. Like you'll see.
Because migration isn't all. I was asking because migration isn't always in one direction.
Right.
Also, as you're saying about Guyana from the diaspora, Guyanese from the diaspora returning also.
Right.
But I was thinking about the Cuban situation.
I see, yeah.
Or Venezuela. We have a context now with contemporary Guyana is living different migration experiences.
Yeah. Now I remember our conversation.
It wasn't here.
It was something else. But I think it's really in continuing to talk about the diaspora and the Caribbean and all of we talk about it like how there's difference in the diversity and we're connected but we're all different. I'm really a proponent of migration within the Caribbean diaspora. Like, for example, the Cubans going to Guyana, Venezuelans, and us, Guyanese coming to Yucatan. But just because I think we already share so much. I think that there can be more strength in that unity of coming together. I'm not sure if this is a controversial point, but I think I'm a proponent of it.
Sure, good. Yeah. I think it was interesting because we get the situation of Little Cuba, where hay una situación de la pequeña Cuba la pequeña La Habana en Guyana. Hoy en día los cubanos tienen que viajar a Guyana para tener una visa para viajar a Estados Unidos. Hacen los trámites en la embajada en Guyana. Entonces se establece una red de apoyo de cubanos que han ido antes y que deciden quedarse a corto o mediano plazo para apoyar a las siguientes generaciones que van a venir. Entonces ya se organizan creando ese escenario de familiaridad que comentamos en Nueva York, en Queens, pero en la pequeña Habana, en Georgia, para apoyar a sus familiares que vienen y hacen la trámite. Entonces les ayudan con traducción en la embajada, para hacer el papeleo, para hacer los documentos y crear una cierta estabilidad para los nuevos migrantes. Entonces, me parece que habla de una organización social muy fuerte, ¿no?, en torno a los procesos de migración. So the way when we talked yesterday about how Cuban community supports Cubans coming to do the migration process in the embassy and to do the translation and everything, they create that space of stability, and so it speaks to the way populations who are migrating organize themselves. I mean, it's not just random flux. It's planned and organized, and there's a social stability, and I think that shows in the way the communities function in different places.
Yeah. And again,
I'm not a sociologist, but I mean, there's
neither am I.
This phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like a community of memory?
¿Cuál fenómeno?
Como el fenómeno de estas poblaciones, los cubanos en Guyana,
los guyanos
guyaneses en Queens.
Uh-huh.
Mi pregunta es si podría hablarse como una comunidad de memoria o
could we refer to that as a community of
I think
memory?
It can be, but memory. Yeah,
memory. Como lugar de memoria de.
Más que como lugar de memoria, o sea, la propia gente es el lugar de memoria, ¿no?
Exacto, o sea, community más que comunidad
más que espacio como estatua, como construcción, como museo, como periódico, como literatura, la propia persona, ¿no? Que es there's
a concept of the place of memory, and he said rather than a place he thinks of the community because he thinks of it because of the people.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a memory, but it's also familiarity. I would when I was in Cuba, I felt like I was in Guyana in a lot of ways, even though, and it was memory, it was nostalgic, and I wanted to stay there, because I was like, this is great, it reminds me of Guyana. So I think there's memory and familiarity, absolutely, in migration for that reason.
I think that's important, the role of memory in migration.
Yeah,
el papel que juega memoria en el proceso migratorio. Muy
Very
importante.
¿Quieres decir? Si no, luego yo.
Bueno, eso que comentó Daniel me recuerda que en Cancún, que es en lo que más me centro, existe un grupo que se creó por los mismos cancunenses que se llama Cancún del Recuerdo. Entonces ahí la gente que tiene material del Cancún antiguo, que es el Cancún sin delincuencia, sin tanta gente, etc., comparte fotos, comparte videos, música incluso que se sonaba en la radio de los 70s, que pues sabemos por mi tesis, que fue muy importante.
Cancun.
Gabi is saying that she was thinking about Cancun, where she lives and what she's been working on, and there's a group formed. ¿Son gente mayor? No.
Son adultos la mayoría, personas que vivieron al principio de la construcción de la ciudad.
They formed a group called Cancun in our memory, or in our memories, and they're mostly adults, all adults who were at the beginning of the building, the construction of Cancun, and they get together and they share documents and music and archives and things that belong to the Cancun of then. So again, it's a little bit that idea of the nostalgia, no? That Cancun was better, different,
right.
Or in some way. Que era un Cancún mejor, o sea, hay esa nostalgia, ¿no? De que,
Yeah.
Se tiene ese pensamiento de Cancún al que nos gustaría regresar.
It's a Cancun that they wish they could return to.
No es un lugar que visite y te recuerde la ciudad, sino que al ver la ciudad y su transformación, te acuerdas de lo que hubo antes.
Mm-hmm. So they look at the city as it transforms and they remember what was there before, so they go back to the absences. Regresan a las ausencias, entonces, ¿no? Sí.
Yeah.
Ves edificios y recuerdas la cantidad de árboles que había ahí, por ejemplo.
So they see buildings and they remember all the trees that were there before. So they go back. So it's that kind of nostalgia for absence.
So I think that's great in Cancun. I think it's important to have that for memory, but it's also for preservation, and I think essential for creating a space, a space of a world that's truly diverse. Because I think that you must have pockets of communities, of culture, in order to be truly diverse. And
Hay que tener entonces núcleos, es importante mantener los núcleos de diferentes culturas para mantener la diversidad y la vida.
And I say that coming from a perspective from the United States of America, where people like to say, we're diverse, we have one person from Mexico. You know,
lo dicen desde su perspectiva en Estados Unidos, donde la gente se acostumbra a decir, sí, somos diversos porque tenemos aquí una persona de México. O sea, basta con que en una comunidad hay una persona, otra, para que exista la diversidad, que no es una diversidad real.
But I think true diversity is having a community and having different communities coexisting. Sort of like what Caribbean has been doing, and what works, I think, in the Caribbean diaspora is that they are rich, preserved sort of pockets of culture that sort of coexist. And so my conversation to the United States and America is, if we're going to talk about diversity, it's not one person, sort of a white male-dominated system, but let's have different, really have cultures, preserved, and memory and all that stuff. It's a little controversial.
No, está bien. Siempre cuando se habla de discriminación, cuando se habla de diversidad en Estados Unidos también se habla de discriminación. So when you talk about diversity in the United States, you also talk about discrimination. So,
sí. La diversidad es un punto de quiebre a veces.
She says it's also in Cancun that diversity is a point of rupture because
por ejemplo, en el caso particular de los indígenas, el idioma es una ruptura muy fuerte, pero también en el caso de gente de otros estados, por ejemplo, no sé, pasa un choque o algo así y dicen, es tabasqueño. ¿Por qué? Porque según manejan horrible, ¿no?
So she gives example in Cancun. Again, it goes back to the discussion we had earlier on about symmetry and asymmetry. So diversity functions if you have ethical symmetry, but not if you have ethical asymmetry.
Right.
So in the case of Cancun, you have, and in many of our societies, we have colonial asymmetry. So you have a population here and then a population down below. So in the case of the indigenous population, who even would speak a different language and have a different way of living everyday life, that becomes a point of rupture. That's what she knows. It's diverse, but it's a point of rupture, not a point of coexistence.
The asymmetry.
Because it's asymmetric.
Yes.
Cancun is filled with, has many people from many different places. So she gave the example of an everyday car crash in the city. Oh, they must be from somewhere else, because they're not from here. So they must have they drive crazy because they're from somewhere else. So there's difference in these unbalanced situations don't coexist. They create rupture.
Very good.
So.
Did you have another message?
Have I got another message?
I saw something.
No,
Okay.
dice que she's saying that's fine, that she's